Alright guys, we are nearing the end of these beginning of the year / end of the year tier lists where we go through all of the different classes and see where they're at in terms of like how viable and how good these servants are. And then at the end of the next or / beginning of the next year, we'll go ahead and just do it again to see how these servants have evolved after they start getting more and more buffs, after we get new releases, stuff like that. And again, this is going to be the second to last one, I believe, because this is Berserker and the next one should just be extra class and we should be done. And that'll be the end of the objectively correct 100% no other opinions allowed tier list. Still can't say it with a straight face, but yeah, we're gonna go ahead and just kind of start getting into this one. If you enjoy daily FGO content, make sure you leave a like on the video and you subscribe to the channel. Also, if you haven't already, go check out the Twitch in the description down below, where I stream every weekday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Although I believe this Friday I went a little bit earlier because I was going on a trip for the weekend, but that's besides the point. So let's go ahead and just start diving into this, starting off with our boy Herc. So Herc is going to be going in tier 1.5. The reason I'm going to be putting him up here is that my boy's got some really big attack, he's got some decent crits, and can massively ramp up his buster damage as his guts start to get procced more and more. Now, the reason that I'm not going to be slapping Herc up in tier 1 for that like legendary survival status that he has going on is that, well, technically you can do all of that for like free, quote unquote, having that like massive buster damage and the insane survivability with like his dodge and then the guts he already has and the multi guts that he can get from his bond CE. You do have to get his bond CE. You got to get him to bond 10, and that can take a while depending on what you're kind of like playing, like what speed you're playing FGO at, right? Like, are you someone that really plays FGO like all day, every day? Then it's not going to be that hard. Just slap Herc in the back of all of your parties and eventually you'll get it, and it's not going to be super difficult. But if you're someone that doesn't, you know, play the game like an absolute madman, you might not have Herc's bond CE. Like, you might not get it for quite a while. It might take you up to like a year or two to get like the actual CE if you're just not being prudent and going for it. And it's that, plus it's the thing that I think his NP is a little bit mid, because while his skills are all really good, his NP is like decent when it comes to damage, but it only lowers defense, so it's not really like doing a whole lot. And I think if they're going to give Herc anything, it's probably going to need to be like something to do with his NP. I mean, he's got 15 hits on the thing. Let's find a way to like take advantage of that. I don't know if you want to make him like a star genning guy so he can crit a little bit easier, something along those lines. I think like an NP buff for Herc could definitely like shoot him up into tier 1. But right now, the things that are kind of holding him back is that he really needs to start ramping up that buster damage by proccing a lot of guts to start doing some serious major damage, because before that his damage isn't super great. It's a little like it's passable, it's nothing super insane. But again, kind of the point that you're using Hercules is that you're using him for his insane survivability, so I guess it kind of offsets itself a little bit. But again, the issue is that if you don't get his bond CE, you really can't ramp up on that buster damage because you just won't have numerous guts to really proc all of them. So yeah, that's why I'm putting him up in tier 1.5. Lancelot's going to be going in tier 2, and it's kind of just because Lancelot's a super basic servant. I think he has like a really simple job, but he does it pretty well. But by the end of this video, he's probably going to be very low into tier 2 because, I don't know, in a similar vein to his Saber form, he just does a couple of things kind of well, right? He has big star weight, big crit drop, big crit damage, and insane NP gain for one turn that allows him to basically refund his NP for free, drop a lot of stars, suck them all up, and then just bonk people with some pretty big crits. The problem is that that NP that I just mentioned is not really doing a whole lot of damage. He's like one of the lowest hitting NPs at like 15k or something. Even with the attack buff they gave him on the NP, it's just he doesn't really have any other buffs. Like, there's no like quick buff or NP damage buff that he's really getting. He just has the attack buff to really carry him on that. But he can be really good for also like weaker accounts for the fact that, you know, he can kind of loop that NP pretty easily because he gets like 100% NP gain on his third skill, and he can also drop a lot of stars. I've kind of talked with this a few times, but when I was first playing through FGO, my team comp was I would have Arash, wave 1, pretty much everything. Lancelot would pretty much be able to clear out wave 2s, drop a whole lot of stars, and pretty much always Gilgamesh would clear wave 3, and now he would have like 50 stars to play around with, so even if he didn't kill the person he was fighting, his crits would take them out, or Lancelot's crits would take them out. So he can be really effective. You can use him for stuff like that, but I don't know, if you were going to argue him down to like tier 3, I think that's perfectly fine. Like very bottom of tier 2, very top of like tier 3. I think either one is really fine. Kind of up to your personal preference on that one. Lubu going in tier 3. He's just kind of a very straightforward servant. He's kind of like a one pump chump because his third skill is only for 1 turn. You only get that massive NP damage for that turn. He can trip up a couple of new players because you have to activate his skills in the right order, but in general, he's just kind of like a big bungus servant. Like you just throw him at somebody, he'll do a lot of damage, and that's kind of all you really need him to do. Now, back in the day, that was kind of, you know, really good. Like you could get away with stuff like that, but we have better servants that are doing that, right? Like if you look at like Mori, he's kind of like the updated version of what Lubu is doing. Although Lubu could definitely be helped out if they just toss a couple more buffs his way, but also a lot of the older servants have a bit of a harder time with stuff like that because just inherently their hits are a lot worse, so they kind of struggle when it comes to like just trying to give them raw buffs to build them up. They need more stuff than that. And I'm hoping eventually Laseng will actually start buffing some of their hits to make it a little easier on them. But I mean, Lubu's just doing a lot of really good stuff. I mean, he also pierces defense on his NP. He has a low chance to stun the enemy. So like he's got a lot of stuff kind of going for him. Just good attack, good defense. Stun is technically utility. Pierce defense is some utility that he has. It's just he's kind of a one pump chump. But that one pump that he's able to do is pretty powerful, right? Like you can still get a little bit of mileage out of that even to this day. So, you know, he's not going to be in don't. Like I think you could try to get some usage out of him if you're a newer player. He could be like a really good like boss killing servant or something for you. Then moving on to Spartacus. Spartacus, I believe I have in tier 2. Let me check this out. For those of you guys can't see it, but I have notes pulled up because I really wanted to make sure that I could move through this a bit faster. Because I didn't want to ramble too much on some servants. So I was like, you know what, let me just decide where I'm going to put them already. And then also just kind of like give myself a couple of notes to make sure I don't lose track of them. But I think Spartacus, yeah, tier 2. I think he's held back by his 1-star stat line. I think if Spartacus had, like if he was like, say, a 3-star with the same kit, he'd definitely be like a bit better. You'd probably even be able to slap him into 1.5. But because he's a 1-star, he doesn't really do a whole lot of damage. And he really wants to be this recovery servant, right? With having like 3 different skills that are like giving him HP in some capacity, like whether it be his skills or his NP, he has so much that he's doing that is trying to keep him at like full HP, but he's still a 1-star, so his HP is not super high, and he's still prone to just getting one shot. That's why he has the 5-turn guts. That's really good. It's definitely really strong for him, but again, like he is still a 1-star. What you're probably going to be using him for though is just as kind of like a good wave clear if you don't have like a really strong account. He has a good 30% battery that you can use him for some wave clearing. Like you can use like your Arash and your Spartacus to kind of get by until your actual farming setups are online. And that's really, really good because he does have a 40% buster buff that only lasts for 1 turn. So he's really only meant to clear that 1 node, and then he's kind of just dying out. He's just back to being an HP spam guy, and then his damage falls off. But yeah, I think Spartacus still has a lot of value as like one of those servants, as one of those guys where you can use him to clear waves until you start getting your more proper farming setup set up. Kentoki's also going to be going in tier 1.5. I said also when we were talking about him, but yeah, Kentoki is still very insane with like a really good niche. He's pretty much still got that guy who takes out the big random enemies niche in farming nodes, whatever you want to call that, the Kentoki niche, right? He's still got that on lock with the highest Berserker damage, right? I believe he still has the highest Berserker damage when it comes to offensive NPs. And the 50% battery are just really good. Just like big attack, smack some random big bungus servant, and you absolutely obliterate them, right? They also gave him a little bit of viability in harder fights because he can stack Buster down on the opponent, so subsequent NPs will do more damage. And he has that coin flip stun chance, right? I know it's not exactly a coin flip because of how debuff resistance for some servants works. Like if they have a passive 20% debuff resistance, it's less of a coin flip and more like, you know, it could be like 30% or something. But still, he has a good, decent starting stun chance that can give him a little bit of viability if you want to bring him against some of those boss battles, right? And you can use him to try to just blitz through a boss or something along those lines. But primarily, he is up here because he has that Kentoki niche on lockdown. Like he's got that on lock and he just does it really, really well. Vlad is one of those servants. He's like the first one that I was considering to put into tier 1 because I actually think Vlad is really good. Even after Galatea comes out, while I do prefer Galatea a little over Vlad, I don't think Vlad is like any worse for it, especially because we're still waiting for his second NP upgrade, right? It doesn't just get buffed once, it gets buffed twice to give him that extra longevity, I suppose, right, in boss battles, because then he gains the ability to lower the enemy's arts resistance, and that stacks every time he fires his NP. And Vlad has a pretty easy time looping his NP. With the fact that he has his own 30% battery and his own 30% NP gain buff on top of everything else that Castoria is going to be giving him, assumingly that you're going to be using Vlad with Castoria. So like it makes him just really good for that. But even outside of that, his NP damage is very strong. He's got a solid 30% attack and defense buff for 3 turns. The NP itself is bombing stars. So even though he doesn't have a crit damage buff, once what's her name, Lady Avalon comes out, if you wanted to use her in those comps, she can at least give him crit damage to take advantage of all those stars that he's going to be generating. And even then, he's got good survivability. You can kind of like, you know, bring Lady Avalon instead of Castoria, because Castoria is known for that insane survivability she gives. Well, this guy is not only giving himself a double guts. Unfortunately, one of those only lasts for 1 turn, but still, the fact that he can have a double guts does come in handy sometimes, and he also has the ability to drain an enemy NP that you only get if you're bringing Tamamo on your team. So he brings that aspect as well. And I've said that I think that's a really good thing to have in your art setups, because a lot of bosses are liking to take away all of your buffs, like on break bars or something, like they yeet all of your buffs off of you. Well, this is still a way for you to control the boss without having to worry about losing your buffs, right? So like Vlad can kind of defend himself on both ends of the spectrum by debuffing the enemy by draining NP, or by just flat out giving himself double guts on top of everything else that, you know, Castoria / Lady Avalon gives him. So I think you could probably make a case for him to go up into tier 1. I definitely think that's something you could do, but there's some of the other tier 1 servants that I think you can maybe argue are a bit better or a bit more useful. I don't know, maybe just like to an account that are more of like that must summon status than Vlad is. But Vlad is definitely one of those servants that like he's definitely really good. People like memed on him a lot when the game first came out, but he is good. Like he's legitimately a very, very solid servant. And so if you do pull yourself a Vlad, you get spooked by him. He's definitely strong. Asterios. It's going into tier 2. Now, I think Asterios doesn't see as much play as he used to back in the day, but it's not like Asterios has really gotten any weaker, right? He's got a very solid 30% attack buff and a 40% defensive buff that keeps him really strong, on top of the fact that his NP is heavily debuffing the enemies, right? It's hitting them with like big, fat, stackable attack and defense downs, right? So like not only are they getting weaker, but they're not going to be hitting him as hard, on top of him having like that 40% defense. So it's really good for not only buffing his survivability as a Berserker and his damage as a Berserker, but it's also buffing the team's damage and the team's survivability because of their debuffs on the enemy. Now, a lot of bosses nowadays, yeah, are going to have like higher debuff immunities or a debuff resistance, or they're going to have debuff immunity, my bad, misspoke. They're going to have stuff like that that does kind of shut people like Asterios down. It's probably why he's not seeing much play anymore. But the guy's still very solid. Like, if you wanted to bring him to some boss battles, you could still definitely get some usage out of him. I wanted to say utilization and usage at the same time, but you could still use him quite a bit. He definitely is very, very strong. And he even has a little bit of burst potential as well, with having a very strong buster buff and some star weight on this third skill. So that's also, he's like really good as well. So yeah, I do like Asterios. I think he's very strong in tier 2. One of those servants. And the more that I'm talking about these two guys, the more I'm like looking at Lancelot being like, do you even deserve to be up in tier 2? I might bump him down to tier 3. I'm not gonna lie. Okay, the next like 5 of these guys are just not very good at all. I know that's gonna trigger a lot of people because I know people are like really coping on like Tamamo Cat trying to be viable, but let's just kind of go through these. So Caligula in my eyes is just more like a worse Nightingale, where like he's supposed to be a support / DPS Berserker, but he just has like a far worse stat line as a 2-star. He has the ability to lock down the enemy skills and NPs, which is kind of nice, right? That's really cool. But it's just like not as good as some of the other debuffs that you could be getting from, say, like even Asterios or Nightingale with her support, right? And her debuffs, right, that she's able to do to the enemy party, where you can essentially like face tank NPs, which makes her really insane. So like he's just not doing the job as good as like some of these other servants over here. The Imperial privilege can be really good, but you have to get it. And it kind of just leaves him being like a face card damaging servant. So like again, he's also like worse Super Orion in a way as well. It's just very bad. He has a 50% buster buff that's on a 3-turn clock, which is kind of funny, right? It's like, oh, you could really start spamming this like buster buff and really just start punching people. But again, just kind of like worse Super Orion / worse Nightingale, because he's trying to do like both of their jobs as a low star servant and just not nearly as good as either one of them. I know, hot take, if someone's not doing the face card thing as good as Super Orion, but that's kind of like what it seems like they were trying to build him as, right? Very similar to like Saber Giles, right? Where they want him to be like big face card damaging servants, where they're just not good enough to be doing that, right? I don't know, there's just not enough for me to justify actually using him, and it's just kind of like he's just worse Asterious kind of in my eyes. Darius, I think, is moving in the right direction. The NP gain is very nice, but he has a triple buster deck, and so he might just need like a straight up battery to really help him out at that point. The skill 2 is very nice, it's in conjunction with the guts that he has on his 3rd skill. And I think they're moving him away from trying to be used as like a farming guy, and they really want him to be like an AoE boss killer in like the same vein as, say, Gilgamesh or Ivan, right? Like in kind of the vein of those guys. More so like Ivan, where they're trying to give him more tools for that, because they're giving him stuff like debuff cleanse, and they're giving him buster down that he could put on the opponent, right? So like they clearly want you to be fighting the same guy for numerous turns, giving him the guts and stuff that's only really useful in challenge quests. So I think Darius is kind of like moving in a good direction. I just don't really see a lot of like value in running him, right? Maybe you could argue the same thing as like maybe he's kind of like the AoE version of like Lubu. Maybe he does deserve to be in tier 3, but I think with some of the other servants that I'm going to be putting in tier 3, it doesn't exactly stack up. Kiyohime is kind of like the ultimate copium servant. Like everybody really wants Kiyohime to be good, and I'm sure a lot of people have used Kiyohime, you know, myself included, when they first start their account, because she's an AoE berserker. She can do some really good damage. But if you're gonna level up an AoE berserker as like a new player, you just level up Spartacus. Like the battery and everything is just too good. Plus, if you need to break him out for like any CQs or anything, because your account is just that desperate for somebody, he's definitely got that on lockdown as well, because that dude at least can like heal and stuff, and you know, he can be really good into those challenge quests. Eric Bloodaxe, I don't really know what they're trying to do with Bloodaxe. I'm not entirely sure if they want him to just be like a straight up debuffy guy, but I don't know. They kind of want him to be this like boss killing dude with like lowering the attack and defense, but then also having a guts with debuff cleanse and a max HP buff to try to make up for his low stat line. But I don't know, maybe you could try to use him as like a joke boss killing servant if he's in an event with like a damage buff. I don't really know. Like, maybe you could try to make use of him in that way. And then Tamamo Cat. Okay, so Tamamo Cat, it's funny because Frankenstein is next, and Frank is going to be going in tier 2. And I think if Frank's up here, I might actually bump Lancelot down, actually, because I think Frank is a little bit better than he is. But it's kind of like, if you're going to use a servant that stuns themselves, why would you use Tamamo Cat and not put those resources into Frankenstein, right? I know you can say, well, Tamamo Cat has that one instance of debuff immunity, so she can get at least one free NP off. And it's like, yeah, but you still have to worry about the other nodes. And if you're going to put time into using a looper and you're going to try your best to try to like make her work, you're better off just using Frankenstein, because Frankenstein does like way more damage and she loops way easier because her natural NP gain is dummy high. Plus she also has an insane NP gain buff, right? And so it's like, I don't know, I can't like value Tamamo Cat that high when she's like not really doing anything. It's like the damage is like okay and the looping is okay, whereas like Frankenstein just blows her out of the water when it comes to those. It's like you just rather use Frankenstein at the very least. At least Frankenstein, I believe, can also stun the enemy, so that's also kind of funny. She's kind of like got that kind of going for her as well. I don't know, I guess you could also say, but well, Tamamo Cat can drain the enemy NP, but at that point you're really like just kind of being like, well, I think this one is better than this. It's like, it's whatever. It's like fundamentally what they're doing is AoE quick berserkers. It's like Frankenstein is just blowing out of the water, and I think is way better. If you're gonna like level one of them up, you just do Frank, right? I think that's pretty cut and dry. Beowulf. Beowulf has definitely come a long way. Solid tier 2 contender. He's really good for like burst damage because his first skill is like a damage steroid with like the different multiplicative buffs. And then he's got like really big crit potential with his second skill, but then he kind of falls off after that. They did give him a a 3-turn. Well, I was gonna say 3-turn, but a buff to his 3rd skill where they're giving him like a 3-turn crit buff, and they're giving him a really strong damage mod against giants and dragons. So that's really nice. The only problem that I have is that they're giving him the crit buff on the 3rd skill, but the problem is that his star weight only lasts for 1 turn on the 2nd skill, and because Beowulf is a berserker, as soon as he loses that star weight, he's not going to be able to get any of those stars. So yeah, he'll have the crit buff, but he's not going to be able to get any of the crits, right? Like, he's not going to be able to actually absorb them or really make use of those stars. So that's kind of annoying. That's kind of one of the issues that I have, like, with the design that they're doing with Beowulf. But overall, like, kind of just a better Lubu in a way, where you could do like really solid just like burst damage with him. Like, you can really just burst someone down with a really strong like pop skill 1, pop skill 2, do the NP, obliterate them with some crits. If they're dragons or giants, you could just absolutely clap them even harder. He's got Pierce evasion as well to kind of get around any annoying bosses that have a dodge. So he's kind of got some viability to him. Like, I think Beowulf is better than like tier 3, right? Like, he's definitely come into his own and he's definitely looking really solid. So yeah, tier 2. Then we have Nightingale. Okay, so Nightingale, I have her in tier 3 right now, but I might bump her up to 2 in the middle of the video, because the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm like, the 50% targetable Buster mana burst that lasts for 3 turns is always going to be really insane. And her NP is really good. Like, her NP about lets you face take NPs because you negate like 50% of their attack and 50% of their NP damage. And it makes enemy NPs really weak for that turn. You have to time it correctly. Like, you have to use it when they're going to fire it. But if you do, you're pretty heavily rewarded for it. She's also kind of bulky a little bit because she has those different damage mod and defensive mods against humanoid enemies, which is like every servant, right? So that makes her really strong against like those, and it makes her a little more tanky than the average Zerg. Still kind of weird that she's like a support Zerg, but it kind of ends up working out just a little bit. If they make that targetable, she'll definitely skyrocket up a little bit, because that'd be really insane to be able to give anybody a 50% Buster mana burst and then basically special damage mod against any servant, right? That would actually become really insane. She's also just able to give like the entire party like the insta-kill immunity and the debuff immunity, like stuff like that is really strong as well. So yeah, I think as I'm like kind of convincing myself in the middle of the video to actually bump her up, because I originally had her in tier 3, but I was like, no, I think she's quite a bit better than some of the people down here, right? I think she's a bit better than that. And like, if you're really desperate for like just a bit of extra damage, you can like plug suit in your Nightingale and you'll feel the difference with the 50% Buster mana burst. Coup Alter, yeah. Coup Alter is like a tier 1 guy. This guy's already really insane as is right now, but he's going to get even better after he gets his buff, I think in like 10 days, with the Little Big Tengu event. No, it's the 6th anniversary one. No, he gets it during the 6th anniversary. With Koyenskaya. So I get my events all mixed around. But yeah, basically what they're going to give him on top of everything else that he's doing with the dodging that don't wear off based on turns, they only waste when you use them, the guts that he's doing, even lowering attack and crit chance against the enemy, so it makes him even more tanky and less likely to die to a crit. They're going to buff up his NP damage, and then they're also going to let him remove all of the enemy's defensive buffs. So like, no one can just get around Coup. He can't even be like stalled out of the game or anything. It's gonna make him really insane. I already think he's like solidly in tier 1 for effectively just being the 3-star Coup, but a berserker, and just being like, instead of being a little more tanky, he's way more offensive and able to output like mad amounts of damage just off the nature of being a berserker. But yeah, I think he's already there, and he's just gonna be even better as soon as he gets that buff. Ryko, I think, is a very high, like, tier 1.5 contender. The only thing that I really don't like with Ryko is that they've really restricted her with her 2nd skill with a 30% Buster buff that only lasts for 1 turn. Technically, it's a little bit higher because she has the passive Madness enhancement, so technically it's a little bit higher, but it really is, like, hurting her damage out a lot, right? It definitely restricts how much she's able to do, because everything else she does is insane. Her NP's a star bomb, and you never lose the crit star generation because it procs on her NP. So that's always really good. She drops a ton of stars, sucks them up with her 1st skill, has 60% crit damage backing it up. All of her damage mods are really good, with the demonic, earth, or sky damage mods really insane. And it's just like everything she's doing is really good. It's just she loses a lot of damage when she loses that buster buff, and it's so low for only one turn. Like, I don't know why they were like, yeah, 30% buster for one turn is fine. It's like, it should have at least been 30% for 3 turns, or let's give it a buff, right? Because in the same vein that her crits are they're hit based, let's just make it a 50% buster buff for 3 hits, right? And so let's just do that, right? Like, let's make it consistent with other skills and other servants that are in the game. I think we do that. It definitely helps out Ryko a ton as far as like how good she's going to be So yeah, she's already really solid as is right now. In fact, it was one of the recent GSSRs, I believe. I was like, oh yeah, Ryko's the worst servant on like this GSSR. And well, when Ryko's the worst servant on a GSSR, that means it's a pretty solid GSSR, right? She's definitely a very, very strong servant, even still to this day. Then there's Ibaraki. So she's going to be going in kind of like the higher end of tier 2. For some reason, I thought she had like a guts or something, but she actually doesn't technically. So I was like, okay, that's kind of hurt her just a little bit, because she is really strong. Like, her NP does very strong damage while yeeting off the enemy's buffs. The Oni Charisma is still Oni Charisma, being a double buff that lasts for 3 turns, so it makes her damage really consistent. She can cleanse her own buff, she can heal herself, and do big 100% crits for 1 turn. But I think the problem is that they put a lot of that extra stuff into a Shooten also being on rotation, and there's really like not another Shooten you want to run with Ibaraki in any like serious manner. Like, you don't want to run Caster Shooten and Ibaraki together. It's not exactly worth the hit you're taking to the team. Or you don't want to do normal Shooten plus Ibaraki, because they're kind of trying to do different things. But I guess that one you could maybe make work a little bit more. Now that Shooten's a little more self-sufficient because of her 30% battery, she can kind of handle herself a little bit more. But also them both being different card types. You know, Ibaraki being a single target buster servant and Shooten being an AoE arts assassin. You kind of need to bring different supports to support them, so it can make things a little bit awkward. So I don't know, toss another like buff Ibaraki's way, and I think she could definitely make it up into 1.5. I definitely think she's kind of on that cusp. She's one of those servants that's definitely a bit better and could definitely be argued to be up there. But I also think some of the other servants we're going to be getting in 1.5 and 1 are just a little too good for her to kind of crack up in there. MHX altars. This is just like the best, if not in contention at the very least, if not the best quick DPS servant in the game. That might change a little bit when Tyra comes out, because Tyra is really insane. I can't wait to make the video on her and talk about how just insane this servant is and bring it to everyone's attention. But I mean, she's literally like the embodiment of one of those servants of, I don't need any defense because I'm just going to obliterate the enemy in 3 turns, right? Like, I'm just going to destroy them in any like 3-turn setup. I don't need any defense at all. My defense is obliterating the enemy, because she's got a solid attack buff. She's got a solid quick buff that are both going to allow her to just cook for 3 turns. She's got a special damage mod against sabers already, which again just lets her destroy those people if you ever bring her to a saber fight. But then she's also going to get a damage mod against, I believe it's good, it's either good or lawful, I forget which one, but it's a very solid special damage mod on top of that. And because it's an NP buff, it just means inherently she's also going to do more damage. So it's like, she just ends up being like one of the most like solid DPS servants in the game. The only thing that I really don't like about her is that her crit damage is like for 1 attack per card. It's really weird. Like, it's like 1 for her buster card, 1 for her arts card, 1 for her quick card. It's really weird. I guess it makes sure that you don't like waste the buffs, I guess, but it's just very, very strange. I don't really like it too much. But like, even like her not having like a battery or like any NP gain buff, she just has like an insane natural NP gain stat that just allows her to loop like an absolute mad lad, right? Like, she loops really fine, her damage is really insane. And I guess even for like the crit point, it's like, well, if you're pairing her with Scotty, it doesn't matter because Scotty gives her 100% quick crit damage anyway. So she doesn't really care that she's only having those, you know, 1 crit attack things that she's going there, but it's just stupid insane, right? Hijikata. All right, Hijikata is actually not that bad. Okay, my boy's actually going into tier 2. He's actually going to be able to make it in there, because Hijikata is actually a runnable guy. You can actually get some mileage out of Hijikata. I'm kind of tired of some of the memes coming out, because I understand people don't want to pull certain servants like Vlad, like Hijikata, like they're like, oh, I don't want to get this servant. It's like, yeah, but if you do pull them, I know you're gonna be a little upset. They're at least fine. Like they're like, Vlad is very solid and Hijikata is runnable. Like you can actually gain some mileage out of him. He's literally just a giant beat stick that you're gonna be able to run. He gives the entire party, including himself, a 20% buster buff and a little bit of star gen to kind of gen some stars. So like everybody in the party can kind of gen some stars. So everybody can do a little bit of crits. He has this whole like niche where the lower his HP is, the more crit damage he gets and the more damage he gets on his NP. And they gave him a guts to help him out with that, right? They also gave him like a debuff cleanse, so you're not like, oh, I'm at 1 HP and then I died of burn or like a poison or something stupid like that. And so they helped him out. Like they gave him something really, really solid where it's just like, yeah, if you can kind of hang out at that lower HP threshold, or if you're just an absolute god using the necromancy CE that gives you like infinite guts practically, Hijikata can look really insane. Like his 1 HP damage is pretty dummy good, right? And you can pretty much force that to happen because of his guts. So, and not only that, he could do really insane crits as well. So it's like, no, Hijikata is definitely really, really solid. Not like really insanely good or anything, but he is solid. You can definitely make use of Hijikata, and he's not like, oh, you should put him in don't tier, because I don't like Hijikata. It's like, I don't care if you don't like the servant. I don't care for Hijikata very much either, but I'm not gonna cap. I'm not gonna like lie to people and say that like, oh, this guy is just terrible dog water. You can't even use him. Anyway, ChaCha going into tier 3. So ChaCha kind of had this niche a while ago where she was kind of just like your wave clearer because she's a free NP5. She's a Berserker, and like you just kind of let her NP refund skill that she has just build up, and then you just have her clean up wave 3. It's just not quite as good anymore. It's just not super great because that's kind of all she's able to do. It's kind of like a niche that's kind of died out a little bit. It's just not super great anymore. I don't really have anything else to really say about ChaCha. That's kind of it. Penthesilea is pretty solid if you're fighting a Greek male. If not, she's kind of just okay, right? Kind of in the same vein that like Hijikata is just a big beat stick. She is just kind of like a big beat stick with decent damage normally, but she really shines against those Greek males. And you know, those are like your Achilles, your Chiron, your Hertz, or people like that. They're people that you'll probably run to every now and then, and she could just absolutely cook them up. Her NP refund is really nice, just kind of allowing her to spam buster cards, and it does actually get better in the future because how it's kind of designed is that you could just keep clicking Penthesilea's buster cards and she'll still refund NP because of that NP refund skill. It gets better in the future because Koyenskaya has a buff that whenever you attack with your buster cards, you get 10% NP back as well. So like it kind of just even better pairs out with Koyenskaya and just allows her to really go ham taro on that. And yeah, other than that, she's just kind of like a solid servant. Like she's either just going to be a really good beat stick for you, or you're going to bring her against any Greek male character and she's going to throttle them into the ground, right? And that's kind of like Penthesilea's niche that I think she does pretty good. Bunyan. Okay, so Bunyan's really weird to rank because she's like a support DPS Berserker. Like she gives everybody like health, she gives everybody like buster buffs, she lowers all of the enemy's defense. Like she's just doing a lot of like good stuff in general, right? And was very popular for like even like Grail targets because she had one of the quickest NPs in the game. If not, I believe it was the quickest, and she was a free to play, right? And her damage would be good enough if you grailed her that she could just pretty much take out any node that you really needed her to, as long as it wasn't super insane, right? Like she could just be one of your wave clearers. I still think she's pretty decent, even if she's kind of dying off when it comes to being a wave clearer. You could still use her as kind of like a little baby support. You know, again, being able to get that little buster buff, being able to lower the enemy's defense, stuff along those lines that still do contribute to the team's overall damage. And she's a 1-star, so she's really cheap to bring as well. Also, a free NP5 can do a little bit of damage here and there if you still need that. So, yeah, I think Bunyan's pretty solid. She's hanging in there in tier 2. Nobu's Zark I'm actually going to put kind of around Penthesilea because they're kind of the same person, right? They both have like niches, although Nobu's is a bit better being anti-divine. Divine is a little bit more common than your Greek mythological males. But yeah, in kind of like the same vein, she's just doing a lot of like really good stuff. and the fact that like she has a dodge to keep herself alive. We like to see that. She has a lot of refund skills where she's like not refunding a lot of stars or a lot of NP every turn, but she's refunding enough that's kind of nice to kind of just give her a little bit of that extra edge that she needs. She wasn't, like, I believe initially she didn't have the grant self burning battlefield on NP, but she gets it when they buff the NP, and that definitely made her a lot better, because then it guarantees that she's going to get that 20% attack buff that's really strong. And so it allows her damage to be pretty decent, but then be really good against like divine enemies and everything. And I've actually brought out no Berserk against some divine bosses in the past couple of like months or so over on the NA version, just because I was curious to see how she would output. And while she's definitely not like the best DPS you could be bringing in the game, her DPS is good enough, right? Like her damage, especially against those divine enemies that are fairly common. You know, you can kind of expect to fight divine bosses in Fate. We're always going to get divinity characters, so she'll age pretty well. Just hoping they start throwing her a couple more buffs here and there to kind of help her out, because she has that awkward Skahawk thing where you can refund a lot of her NP by doing like an Arts Buster chain if her NP gain is high enough. She has that weird thing going for her, so I don't know. I'd kind of like to see them fix that a little bit, but yeah, and maybe like touch up the second skill a little bit and maybe make those values of her refund a little bit better. Okay, so this is probably gonna make some people actually upset. This is probably gonna be with the, I guess, the hot take of the video, I suppose. But yeah, Atalanta Altar is going in tier 3. I just don't really see a whole lot of value in using Atalanta Altar. I don't really get why you go for her, because her quick buff is only for 1 turn, right? So she could do some good damage on that turn. But then she's got like weird crit stuff going on. So like her dodge and crit skill, like the Eye of the Mind stuff, still really good, right? Sealing NP's pretty good. Curse can be good if they give her some synergy with like herself. Like let's say they give her a 50% damage mod against cursed enemies. That can actually be really good and can make up for turns where her quick buff is down. But I don't know, then they gave her like the weird Buster crit skill for some reason, and I'm like, you want to use her with normal Scotty with the quick crit damage? I guess retroactively it got better, because Ruler Scotty also gives the Buster crit skill. So like Ruler Scotty is like a quick support that also wants to buff up some Buster cards for damage. So like retroactively it's a bit better now, but again, we don't have Ruler Scotty. We won't have her for like 2 years. So we'll evaluate that again later as that comes. But I don't know, like she's definitely not gutter trash. Like I don't think she's like, oh, you can't use Atalanta Altar, because I've used her just because I like Atalanta, right? I think she's super cool, and who doesn't like cat girls in your anime games, right? Come on, man. But yeah, so I like to use Atalanta Altar a bit, and outside of me just liking the character, it's kind of like, is there really a point to really using her when I could use like MHX Altar? Not really. Like, probably better off using somebody else, but she can get the job done, you know? And again, kind of like, say, Skahawk or something, right? Skahawk pre-buff, I suppose, would be a better analogy. She's really good for, like, 1 good turn of burst damage. Like, if you just need to do, like, a lot of damage right now, like, she can still kind of fulfill that role a little bit. Although, again, you have other servants that are better at doing that role. So, long and short of it, I don't think she's gutter trash. I just don't really see a whole lot of reason to actually break her out specifically. Okay, so Jerg's on. Berserker Jean. I can't speak today, bro. I'm like losing it. But Berserker Jean, I have her in 1.5, and that's because I'm trying to fight my own bias on this, because I really like Berserker Jean. Like, not only am I a huge Jalter stan, but I think she's really, really good. Like, she does like all the basic stuff that you would just want your DPS to do. Like, she's got a battery. She buffs her NP gain. She has a regenerating dodge buff. She's a free NP5, so her damage is really good. I mean, she's got a good Buster card buff. You can, even if you like the burn memes or whatever, she can do a lot of burn all over the place by spreading it, right? Like, she can, you know, do all that good stuff, right? But if I'm really being like nitpicky, and I'm like, despite my love for this servant, if I'm being nitpicky, I'm like, okay, is that her Buster buff only lasts for 1 turn, so she loses damage after you fire that off. She'll be losing a little bit of damage, and her NP doesn't really do anything, right? Like, realistically, it's not doing anything. Like there's nothing really going on. It's not contributing much. Like it's not removing enemies buffs. It's not piercing invul. It's not piercing defense. It's not stacking a buster buff for her. It's not giving her NP damage to make her damage even better or anything like that. It's not giving her crit. Like it's not doing anything really in particular. It's kind of an uneventful NP. So I'm like, I guess if I wanted to do stuff to hold her back, I'd say something like that. But yeah, I'm really trying to hold back my bias here because, you know, you guys know your boy loves his Jalter servants. Because look, until Morgan comes out, Jalter is still #1, and even arguably might still be #1 after Morgan comes out. We'll see. I have to read the English version of Lost Belt 6 because all I have right now are the cliff notes for, you know, the JP versions. But yeah, so we'll see. So I'm holding back on that one. If somebody's triggered that she's not in tier 1, just know that I'm trying to fight back my own bias there. Anyway, Zhang Yu. Zhang Yu is actually really good. He's a really good, like, burst AoE quick servant dude, right? He's really solid. He has pierce invincibility. He's got dodge. He could do insane crit damage for return, having 150% crit damage total and very high star rate to make sure he can actually hit on those. His quick and buster buffs are very solid at 30%, giving him some pretty decent NP gain on his quick cards and letting his buster cards really have that bite on there. Also getting an NP damage buff on his NP to double buff with that quick buff as well. Pierce's defense, refund stars on having all of that good stuff. So like he's just a solid good guy, right? Like if they just give him like an NP damage buff, or not an NP damage buff, but like an NP gain buff, or maybe like a battery or something, I think it would help him out a lot. Although I'm leaning more towards the NP gain buff, like give him like 50% NP gain for 3 turns, and my guy Zhang Yu is going to cook. Because then at that point, he just becomes like actual 5-star version of Lancelot over here. He's just able to loop all over the place. And well, I guess we already have Riku, so we don't really like need that, but come on, it's a good option for people that don't have Riku. They have Zhang Yu, they'd actually be able to break him out. But the guy can do really insane damage, and I got to acknowledge that. And again, the pierce invincibility on top of how much damage he does is just like, no, not only am I going to hit you with this 150% crit, maybe even more if you're using him with Scotty, but you're not even going to be able to dodge this. I'm going to smack you with this big sword, okay? So I think he's really a really solid guy. I mean, that's kind of what tier 2 is, right? Tier 2 is kind of like, hey, these are just solid. They're solid, pretty solid guys. Arjuna Altar, I don't think I need to explain why Arjuna Altar is good. I mean, the only thing I think you could really hold against him is that he is very reliant on getting that debuff on the enemy. If there is not a debuff on the enemy for that first skill, like the kind of like the damage mod thing he has against debuffed people, if he doesn't get that, he kind of looks like he sucks. Like he looks really bad. And he doesn't look super great if you don't get that, but you have other ways to smack that debuff on people. So like it's not that bad. You can kind of force it yourself with like other servants, right? With their debuffs and such. So it's like you could make it work, but you really need to make sure that you get that to work, because otherwise he can look really bad. But aside from that, it's Arjuna Altar. Like what do you want from me, right? He's Berserker Gilgamesh, right? If Gilgamesh has like the title of being able to do single target damage as an AoE, Arjuna Altar's like the same guy, right? He's pretty insane. All right, Mori. I believe I have Mori at 1.5. Yeah, because Mori's pretty solid. Like I love using Mori, dude. I see him as like the more modern version of Lubu. My guy literally comes in here smacking people for like 1 billion crits with his 100% crit damage buff, lowering defense, raising attack, just smacking everybody all over the place. And then when Mori dies, he bombs 20 stars and says, all right, gonna let the other guy handle this, right? Like, Mori's just really insane. Again, it's kind of hard to rate the more limited 3-star servants, because as you guys know, for limited servants or most gold servants, I rate them at NP1 as opposed to the free-to-plays where I rate at NP5. Because you're guaranteed to get all 5 copies of the free-to-play. You are like, once you get your first Arjuna Altar, you're never guaranteed to get another one, right? Like, you may, for the rest of FGO's history, be stuck with NP1 Arjuna Altar, right? It's up to the gacha, and I don't trust the gacha, right? I don't trust it. So it's like, Mori is technically one of those guys that's limited, but as someone that has an NP1 Mori, I can still say that this guy goes Hamtaro. He is still very, very solid at NP1. You know, I can only imagine if I got him at NP5, how much better this guy would be. But yeah, Mori is definitely a really, really solid guy. Salome, okay, so I know a lot of people are probably going to want Salome to be lower, but I would challenge those people to go use Salome. She's actually not that bad. She's actually a pretty solid servant, right? Most of the servants, actually, for that matter, that came with this batch of guys, like the Jason, the Chen Gong, Salome, the Paris, like most of those guys are really solid. Like, I don't really think there's a bad one among them. I mean, maybe like Bartholomew's a little weird because he's like specifically going after the bronze servants, but it's like most of these guys are really strong, and it's like Salome has a really good like lawful good damage mod, and I get that's a little more restrictive, right? Because they have to be lawful and good. It can't just be lawful or good. But she is a berserker, so then when you consider the fact that, well, it's more restrictive, but any lawful good person can be taken out by her because she's a Zerk, so she has access to all of those. It's not as bad. She has a decent attack whip that allows her to do some pretty decent damage. She's got some solid defense with the immunity and the invincibility that she has going for her, although they're both for one instant, so you gotta time them kind of correctly. And then her damage, I mean, it's like kind of fine, but it can be low without the damage mod. The main thing about Salome that people kind of have a hard time with is her third skill, is that every turn she's going to remove one of her defensive buffs, and then at the 7th turn, I believe, she gets a 100% battery, which is pretty good. I mean, if you think about someone like Enkidu, right? Enkidu has like a 50% battery on a 10-turn cooldown. You can kind of view this as like a 7-turn 100% battery. That's really solid. You just have to be really good about managing your defensive buffs, right? You got to know like where you're putting them and which one is going to get removed. Like if you really need the invincibility, it's like you do the invincibility and then you give her some other buff so that that buff that goes in front of her, the most recent one, is the one that gets taken and she still has the invul, right? You just got to like kind of get used to timing it and everything, and she can be really solid, right? I think she's definitely one of those servants that is like, it's not scary, you know, you can break her out, try her out for the one time, and she is really, really strong. So yeah, I know I had to kind of make a case right there for Salome, but I know a lot of people are like, ooh, she's kind of a weird servant. I don't know if I really want to try to use her, but trust me, she's not that bad, right? You can definitely take her out for a spin. Musashi. All right, Musashi Berserker. This servant is really insane because she can either be your farmer or she can be your boss killing servant. She's really good for both of those. The double hits plus the NP gain is very strong for her being able to loop very easily in both scenarios. The fact that she has built-in Pierce invincibility allows her to quickly mop up a lot of like challenge quest enemies, because regardless of dodge or invincibility, she's just able to mop them up really well. Her damage is just really strong as a whole. I know she like sucks up a lot of her HP, but that's why she's got the dodge and the guts, baby. That's supposed to kind of keep her in the game. And when you also consider that her support is Castoria and even in the future Lady Avalon, both who are like pretty defensive servants, like they're really good at keeping their guys alive, it's not that big of a deal. Musashi can afford to be a little bit reckless. So it just in general, she's a very, very strong servant. She has like the weird NP seal thing against sabers. I'm kind of hoping in the future they lean into that and also give her a special damage mod against sabers or something. You know, that'd be kind of cool. But yeah, she's just very solid in all aspects. Like a very strong looper that you can use for farming, or just really good at trashing challenge quests, right? Just very good at that. And then finally, we're going to clear out with Dino Mommy and Bryn Hilder. Don't get offended because I'm just going to smack them there at the very, very bottom because they're both tier 2. They're both just kind of solid guys. If you're talking about Bryn, like Bryn isn't really doing anything exceptional or anything like super insane. She's kind of just like .jpeg good servant, right? Because she has solid defense and that she has the double dodge plus the damage reduction in case she loses those dodges. She has nice 20% NP and 10 stars every single turn for consistency, and her natty NP gain is pretty high. It allows her to be pretty consistent as she's just casually fighting, plus the fact that she has the arts and buster buff, the buster buff giving her more damage, and the arts buff being really nice for buffing up the NP gain of those arts cards. It just makes her like pretty solid. I think one of the worst oversights for her though is that it's like, okay, her third skill kind of functions as her charisma, being able to give them like a 30% arts and buster buff. And you're like, oh, this would be really insane for like the different supports you would bring, because giving them that arts buff would be so crazy because it's buffing up the NP gain of their arts cards, making it easier for like your Merlins or your Castorias or your Scotty for some reason to be able to really get those nice NP things. But the only like major support that's going to be getting this is Waver for her. So like, she's kind of missing out on all of that. And then you could be like, well, the Buster buff might be really nice for Koyanskaya and Oberon, but they're not on the tag either, right? So it's really, really sad because it's like, it's such a huge missed opportunity for her because she can't really give it to anybody that's going to be super useful to her, right? Like that you could really take advantage of. Pierce invincibility on the NP is really nice, but her damage is also kind of low. So it's kind of like she's got a lot going, but probably is going to need like an NP upgrade that maybe also throws in like an NP damage or something along those lines. Like 20% NP damage to multiply into that third skill, so she's doing a little bit of extra damage. And then Dynamami is kind of just in the same boat, where she's just like really solid. Like she's got really solid defense and a turn of star weight if you want to do a decent crit turn. She gives herself 30% buster and quick. I don't really know why they give her the quick because she only has one quick card. I don't really get it, but hey, it's nice. I guess we'll take it for the extra NP gain on the quick card. A little bit of extra star gen, I suppose. One of the nice things she's able to do is she's able to overcharge one of her allies, and you can really take advantage of that by, let's say you're running her with Waver. You can give that to Waver, and Waver will now drop extra stars on his overcharge, right? Stuff like that can be really nice. You can give it to Castoria, and then Castoria gives you extra solemn defense. So it can be really nice. It pairs really well with any supports you really want to bring with her, because the Buster and Quick go to her, and then it's targetable, like who you want to give the overcharge to. So that's really nice. She has a really nice niche in being able to clear a debuff from the party, like the most recent debuff you have, which is probably most of the time going to be the one you want to clear, unless the boss hits you with like numerous ones. Like it'll be like, oh, the boss stunned Castoria and then attacked Dynamami twice. Okay, the last debuff is the one that I want to clear anyway. Like most of the time you'll find yourself in those situations. Sometimes the boss will be like, I stunned you and then I lowered your defense. And you're like, well, great, I wanted to clear the stun, but because it's only the most recent, you know, debuff that I'm able to clear, it can get a little annoying, but like her damage is also fine with her being able to stack like attack on her NP and everything. So yeah, like she just ends up being like a rather solid servant. Like nothing really harsh to say about her. She's just like pretty solid as a whole. But yeah, this is what it's kind of looking like for the Berserker list. I'm pretty happy with this one. I think actually jotting down notes helped me keep my thoughts a little clear on where I was going to view all these guys, and it kind of helped me like pre-prep on what I wanted to say because I already thought about it. But yeah, it still ended up being quite a long video though, but I'd love to get you guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know what you think about the list, and as per usual, I will try to leave the link for the tier list in the description down below. Not the description, but in the top comment. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here because your boy is clearly very, very tired. Even though it's not even that late. I don't know. Today's just been kind of a weird day. I've been prepping to go out of town for the weekend, and so I've been doing a lot of like prep work and being like, okay, I gotta make sure that I have videos still available for people by the time that I leave and everything, and trying to get everything ready to go. So I don't know, maybe I'm just a little tired, maybe I'm a little exhausted, but I still think this came out pretty well, and I think I'm still pretty happy with you know, how everything ended up being. So yeah, I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace late, guys.